In the quiet sliver of morning, when the sky hasn't quite decided whether to stay dark or begin to blush with day, there are whispers that drift unnoticed, gentle murmurs that speak only to those who still believe in softness. In those moments, before the world wakes fully, it's easy to think the small things don't matter. A leaf blown across a sidewalk, a feather that twirls once and is gone, the sound of tiny paws behind a wall, fading into stillness. But maybe we've got it backwards. Maybe it's the little things, frail, flickering lives scarcely bigger than our palms, that carry the deepest echoes when they leave us. Maybe home isn't a house, or a room, or a roof. Maybe it's a scent, a voice, a warm place to curl into on a winter night. Maybe home is shaped not in bricks or beams, but in heartbeats and hushes, where every paw print finds its meaning. You wouldn't expect to hear a story like this. Not from me, not from anyone. When we speak of courage and cleverness, we reserve such words for those who walk tall, dogs who leap into rivers, cats who return across states. We save our awe for claws and fangs and the memory of a name, but we forget sometimes that the world looks different when you stand only 2 inches tall, when a fall from a stair is a canyon and a house is an immeasurable country. This is not the story of a daring stallion or a loyal bloodhound. This is the story of a creature so small his heart could have fit into the hollow of your thumb, and yet, somehow, lost in a world so big and sharp and loud, he chose faith over fear. His name was Dandelion, a Syrian hamster with fur like toasted honey and eyes like polished beads, barely the length of a wooden spoon, unremarkable at first glance. But one cool autumn day, Dandelion disappeared, gone just like that, and by every stretch of logic, by every rule of nature or chance, he should have never come back, should have been taken by a cold night, should have vanished beneath leaves or into shadows, never to be held again. But then, one morning, nearly 2 weeks later, he did come back. This is that story. Quiet, yes, small, maybe, but the kind of story that nestles into the corners of your memory, the way Dandelion once curled into a pocket of fleece beneath a child's heart. Because if home can vanish overnight, so too can it be found one tiny poststep at a time. It started with a birthday, not one filled with balloons or noisy crowds, but something softer delighted giggles over homemade pancakes, a crown made of craft paper and glitter glue, and the kind of wishes whispered across candlelight. Ellie turned 10 that morning, and age, where childhood still lingers, but curiosity has begun to stretch its wings. She was the sort of child who knelt to rescue worms from sidewalks and raised her hand in class, just to ask if raccoons could miss their families. Her world was one of soft-spoken kindness, a quiet bedroom painted sunflower yellow, shelves heavy with worn animal encyclopedias, and a collection of plush creatures worn threadbare with love. Her favorite was a floppy-eared bunny named Mr. Maple. She whispered to its secrets, not even her diary knew. Love, in all its forms, flowed freely from her, especially toward animals, with whom she shared a certain unspoken understanding. Her family lived in a modest 2-story home, nestled amongst dogwood trees, where the windows caught golden light in the early evenings and made everything feel like a warm memory. There was her older brother, Ben, who was 2 grades ahead in developing a cautious sense of coolness, but still slipped marshmallows into Ellie's hot chocolate when no one was looking. Their parents, Sam and Carla, were gentle souls working long hours, but always pausing to notice when Ellie had drawn a new poster of an imaginary animal or baked squirrel-shaped cookies for the birds. That birthday morning, after the final pancake had been devoured and Ellie had finished opening gifts wrapped in blue paper with silver stars, Ben cleared his throat and reached beneath the table. What emerged was a little cardboard box punched with careful air holes. Ellie's breath caught. A whisper of movement, a rustler moment suspended in time. Lifting the lid revealed a pair of bead-bright eyes, further color of warm toast, and twitching paws no bigger than sunflower seeds. The hamster blinked slowly, nose twitching as it took in the world. For the first few seconds, Ellie could do nothing but stare. Hand to her mouth. "Meet Dandelion," Ben said, a little sheepishly. "He's yours." The name, he admitted, later, had come from Ellie's tendency to gather dandelion fluff each spring and pretend they were wishes. And this hamster, small and quiet and golden, felt like a wish come true. From the very first touch, Ellie's hand, trembling slightly as she let Dandelion step tentatively onto her palm, it was clear they belonged to each other. He didn't startle or run. He simply nestled into her cupped hand as though he'd been waiting. The days after that glowed differently. Ellie took to reading aloud to Dandelion each evening, her voice laced with soft rhythm as she shared stories of jungle, mice and traveling moths. Dandelion would press against the bars of his cage when he saw her, nose twitching with recognition. He especially liked it when she sang. His ears would flicker, his tiny body still, as if soaking in the sound like sunshine. His cage sat in a corner of Ellie's room, beside the window that faced the wild cherry tree. It was no ordinary cage, but a carefully curated haven 3 levels with tubes and hideaways, soft bedding that smelled of lavender hay, and painted wooden signs Ellie had crafted herself. Dandelion's den, no cats allowed, and magic happens here. She would open the cage door most days to let him sit on her desk and explore under supervision. There was something almost human in the way Dandelion would pause before stepping out, sniff the air, and scurry cautiously forward. He seemed to know where Ellie's notebooks ended and thought twice before wandering over them. He stored treats with methodical purpose, often hiding the best seeds behind her pencil holder as if it were an extension of his home to Ellie. Dandelion was never just a pet. He was a friend, a secret keeper, a little pulse of joy with fur too soft to describe. She told him about learning fractions and why she thought the moon was lonely. And when she cried the first time, a classmate teased her about her freckles. She buried her face in her blanket while Dandelion climbed into the sleeve of her sweater and simply stayed there. There was a gentleness to him, an unspoken trust. He never bit, never flinched. He would curl into her hands and fall asleep, a faint rise and fall of breath, the only sound. He was patient, even wise, in the way children believe animals can be, and he learned, slowly, yes, but with a strange intelligence that made Ellie's parents take notice. He would respond to the sound of crinkling treat bags and the subtle jingle of Ellie's charm bracelet. He learned that the squeak of the floorboard meant someone was coming, and that tapping twice on his igloo meant it was time for play. Once, while filming him with her brother's phone for a school project, Ellie swore he posed when she called his name. He liked the smell of peanut butter, loathed broccoli, and had a particular fondness for climbing into ceramic mugs that still held the ghost heat of tea. More than once, he nestled there while Ellie did her homework, almost as if by being close to her, he too was learning something. "Little professor," Ellie would whisper affectionately, "you're going to be the smartest hamster who ever lived." And Ben, though he wouldn't say so aloud at first, noticed it too. Once he caught Dandelion navigating a maze they'd built out of books and cardboard with uncanny speed. He actually remembers the path, Ben had muttered, amazed. That's kind of cool. In the living room, their parents exchanged soft glances over the edge of coffee mugs, watching the bond unfold. A child and her hamster, and something deeper that couldn't be named but only felt. It wasn't long before Dandelion had woven himself seamlessly into the family rhythm. Morning routines included a quick peek into his cage to say hello. Evening dinners often ended with Ellie recounting his latest antic stories, told with the reverence of someone discussing an old, beloved friend. Dandelion had charmed them all in his quiet, ceaseless way. In photographs taken during that golden autumn, there's always a warm hue over everything, light skimming through leaves. Ellie holding Dandelion up to the window to show him the clouds, Ben pretending not to be interested but standing nearby nonetheless. They were moments too effortless to realize their value in real time. Moments that would one day be remembered in clearer focus. And still, in between school and homework, and baths and bedtime stories, there was Ellie and Dandelion, whispering across the hush of evenings, listening, learning, trusting. No one spoke the word miracle, but if you were listening closely, you could almost hear it in the rhythm of their days. Something small, something sacred, something about to change. It happened on a Tuesday morning, the kind that slips by, unnoticed, sky overcast, the scent of damp leaves on the wind, and the hush of a household not yet swept into the rhythm of its day. Ellie had overslept. School loomed, socks were missing, and rushed voices floated up the stairs like birds startled from branches. In the flurry of movement, Ellie stood in her slippers at Dandelion's cage, murmuring apologies as she packed fresh bedding into the corner he always slept in. The latch on the top access door had grown slightly loose over time, nothing serious, just a gentle tug needed to open it. But this morning, the tug wasn't quite completed. Her fingers fumbled to secure it, distracted by the sound of her mother calling up from downstairs. Double quotes Ellie, let's go. Your lunchbox. She gave the latch an unconvincing press, thinking she'd double-check it after school. But the bus waited for no one, and in seconds, the cage door was left ever so slightly ajar, just enough that a curious paw, placed just right, might find purpose. The house emptied, chatter and footsteps dissolved. Silence took its place, thin and waiting. Within that silence, Dandelion stirred. The scent of fresh hay and the cool hint of autumn leaking through the walls told him that the day was beginning. But something was different. The mesh hatch above trembled ever so slightly when he touched it. He tilted his head, twitching once, twice, then stretched tall, nose brushing the latch that gave way without resistance. There was a pause, a held breath between choice and consequence, and then, slowly, soundlessly, Dandelion climbed, first onto the ledge, then down the cage ramp, his paws pattering against the plastic floor. He reached the lip of the cage, gripped with determination, and lowered himself onto the desk's wooden surface. This was not his first exploration. Ellie's desk had become familiar over time, a jungle of notebooks, acrylic pens, and glittering rock samples labeled in careful handwriting. But today it felt different. No watchful eyes, no gentle cupped hands rising to contain him. He moved. Among glue sticks and bookmarks, sniffed the base of her reading lamp, and found the edge. He hesitated, looked back once, toward his sleeping space. Then he jumped. It wasn't far. Not for a creature of such spry muscles and coiled energy, but the height was still jarring. He landed with soft surprise on a drop of carpet, then sat still. All was quiet. He ran under the bed, past the forgotten shoebox of dried pressed flowers Ellie meant to scrapbook, past dust bunnies and a lost mitten, toward the hallway door open, just enough for a dream to slip through. Downstairs, the air was cooler. Sparse light pooled through the blinds. Dandelion moved like a shadow, quick and weaving, following flickers of scent and warmth. The living room was vast, a strange plane of chair legs and unfamiliar textures. Beneath the couch, he paused. New smells, crumbs from snacks past, the faintest echo of family voices. He pressed on at the baseboard. An irregular gaps, small enough to go unnoticed by humans, but large enough for one determined hamster waited. Without hesitation, Dandelion pushed his way in, while he navigated crevices unknown. Upstairs, Ellie returned briefly to grab her forgotten math folder. The room looked as she had left it. Almost, she paused by the cage, something tugging behind her ribs. The silence felt too complete. Her hand touched the latch open. Her breath caught. She knelt, pulling at the blankets, looking beneath the cage's platform. Dandelion. Her voice high, a little laugh bleeding through the panic. Like maybe this was a trick, a dream. No movement. The hunt began in earnest within moments. Ellie scoured her room. Then Ben arrived with a flashlight, crawling beside her. Their father checked under the fridge. Their mother lifted couch cushions. Beds were flipped, closets stripped, nooks, crannies, corners stacked with boxes, banister tops, shoes, cupboards, nothing. By sunset, the house buzzed with worry. What if he got outside? Ellie's voice cracked around the question. Her mother folded her into an embrace, but said nothing, a silence that answered too much. That night, Ellie did not sleep. She left Dandelion's cage open and placed his favorite snacks just outside. The little seed wheels he always hoarded behind her books. She lay still for a long time, listening for tiny sounds that did not come. Clocks ticked, wind shifted. A branch tapped against the window, but no paws scurried across her desk. Number. Familiar rustle in bedding. She cried quietly, pillow pressed close to catch each breathless sob. Her hand reached under her sweater sleeve, where he used to hide when she was sad. No warmth greeted her. Ben knocked once on her bedroom door around midnight, whispering, still no sign. No, Ellie whispered into the dark. He came in anyway, sitting cross-legged on the floor, not speaking, just being there. Their parents searched again the next morning before breakfast. A new routine unfolded. Cereal atop a map of places he'd been seen last. Drawings of crawl spaces. Doodles of a heroic hamster navigating unlikely terrain. When her teacher asked about her red-rimmed eyes, Ellie only said her pet was missing. She didn't say his name. Saying it felt like breaking something sacred. The next evening, they spread flour across the floor of her room with hopes of pawprints. None appeared. A humane trap was bought. It stayed empty. The vents were inspected. Mouse holes patched. But the house still felt a little too hollow. Ellie refused to remove his cage. Refused to stop whispering his name when alone. She left little trails of seeds at each room threshold. Drew sketches of Dandelion in her journal, always smiling down in the hallway where his journey might have begun. She placed a note. It said only, "Please, come home," and beneath it, in a child's careful cursive, "I'm not Ellie without you." Dandelion had never known silence quite like this, the kind that buzzed around your ears and made you feel like the only heartbeat in the world. The duct was cool and close and strong smelling. It hissed gently with the rise and fall of air from the furnace, and dust clung to the fine fur along his sides. He moved slowly at first, whiskers flicking to measure the space around him, each paw step a soft tap on the thin metal beneath. The tunnel seemed to go on forever, left, then downward, then right again. The darkness was total, broken only when he paused beside a faint cross-section where a vent led into a room bathed in light. But he didn't turn there. Something deeper called to him, something that felt outward, a scent, a shift. So he pressed on. Eventually, he emerged into a place unlike anything he'd known. The duct opened into a wide, shadowy room space that smelled of damp wood, cold stone, and forgotten memories. The basement. He huddled at the mouth of the vent, letting his tiny lungs adjust to the heavier air. It took him a full minute before he dared to move. Tools lined the walls here, heavy scents of rust and oil hovering in pockets of still air. Boxes towered like cliffs, sealing off once-used treasures, old photographs, school art projects, a bike that had lost its pedals. Dandelion slipped silently between them, moving like a returning thought. He tasted the dust with his tongue, read the history of the room with each twitch of his nose. There was no food, but he nibbled at a piece of brittle glue on a torn cardboard box and tucked it away behind a hinge in the wall. Instinct ruled here, gather, hide, survive. Still, he wasn't afraid. Not really. Under a water heater, he found warmth and made a nest with scraps of insulation and a crumpled paper towel. He curled there, eyes always half open, nose sniffing toward the ceiling. Above him was the world he remembered, but forward outward that was new. When he found the vent cover leading outside, some immeasurable time later, it might have been a day or two. Time wobbled in the walls. He stared at it for a long, long while. The faintest light bled through its slats. Wind, far stronger than he'd ever known, whispered beyond. Overwhelming but fascinating. He examined every corner of the vent screen, every loose screw, every whisper of flex in the frame. And then, remarkably, he squeezed through. His hips pressed, fur flattened, bones compacted. Then he popped free and blinked at the sky. It was so big, every instinct in him screamed to dart back into hiding, into the burrow of basement walls, but something paused him. Leaves rustled above. Light fell in golden strips between long arms of branches, and the air smelled like wildness. It smelled like secrets. Dandelion scurried under the overhang of the house at first, skimming the edge of shadows where predators rarely looked. The yard was quiet, wetter than he'd imagined, softer too. Earth squished between his toes. A family of ants marched in a single file line that he did not disturb. He passed a low-hanging ivy plant, paused to sip from a dewdrop clinging to a petal. It tasted like nothing and everything water, but with notes of soil and memory. He pressed on. The neighbor's cat surprised him near the woodpile, a lazy, grey creature, more curious than hungry. He froze beneath a patch of sweet elosome and watched its pupil wheels dilate with interest. It sniffed the air, took 2 steps forward, then sneezed and lost interest entirely. Dandelion waited 15 full minutes before moving, just to be safe. Later, he found a pile of raked leaves tucked beneath a maple tree. Day's labor left undone. He tunneled into it and burrowed deep, tail flicking tiny specks of autumn into the air. There, in that rustling palace of color and scent, he made himself a home. Nights came faster now. darker than anything he knew. He popped in and out of hiding. A fallen slice of apple from a bird feeder kept him alive. Once, he came across a discarded cracker sealed in foil. Getting it open took a full evening, but it was worth it. There were stars too. He hadn't known stars. And somewhere inside him, a part remembered the soft rhythm of Ellie's voice saying their names, Ryan, Cassiopeia. Something about a dog in the sky chasing rabbits. He gazed upward more often than not, watching them hover like watchful eyes. Some night's wind carried hints of warmth, familiar smells tucked between blades of grass, the ghost of popcorn, or the scent of lavender shampoo. Ellie's scent, he realized, from a window cracked above her bedroom. When the wind was right, he could hear a little bit, to Dot's soft murmurings, like stories told under covers. He couldn't make out the words, but they felt safe. All around was danger hawks, cold ground, the beginnings of frost, but those sounds, those smells, they held warmth. He started following them. Each night he ventured closer. He'd sit at the edge of the patio, paws folded beneath him, blinking. Up at the balcony where her voice drifted down. The first time he heard her cry, he nearly turned back. But he stayed, he listened. Then, one evening, she read aloud again. Her voice was trembly, but steady. A story about a mouse and a clock tower. He froze mid-step in the grass and listened, breath held, ears forward. That voice, the cadence of home, it swooped through his tiny chest like warmth in winter. He didn't understand words, not the way humans did, but the tone carried melody, and the melody carried memory. He followed the sound back to the side of the house, where he knew the metal vent had once tucked him away. He pressed a paw to the wall. He traced his own journey in scent-alone bedding. Sunflower seeds, the faded trail of his last steps from days ago. The patio was smooth, cold stone, but it smelled like family. He traced those smells like constellations, and every time the wind shifted wrong, every time silence tried to take him, he listened harder. He was trying to go back, trying to find the path not marked by trail or light, but by tiny imprints left on the world's scents and sounds and softness. He didn't know how long it would take, but Dandelion had once climbed a child's pencil holder just to feel the warmth of a tea mug. Surely he could climb the world now to reach a voice. Ellie never quite adjusted to the way silence had taken up space in the house. It wasn't the comfortable quiet of before, of pages turning, of tea mugs being set gently on coasters, of soft pet chatter. No, this silence had edges. It poked at her while she brushed her teeth, tripped her up while she sat through math class, hummed too loudly in her ears when her head hit the pillow at night. Her parents noticed, of course. She smiled when they looked, but it never reached the corners of her face. Her notebooks went untouched. The little sketches she used to do of mice in capes and hamsters in top hats, half-formed and abandoned. She refused to call it giving up, but sometimes her pencils stayed inside the drawer for days. She kept Dandelion's cage exactly as it had been, maybe cleaner. The water bottle was always fresh, the cedar-free bedding fluffed and warm. His food bowl was replenished each night, even though every morning she found it just as she'd left it. She tucked his favorite crinkle tube into the corner like a welcome mat, just in case. At first, the optimism had been strong. Ben had helped her fold little missing hamster flyers, sweet clumsy things with drawings instead of photos. They pin-tacked them to stop signs and community boards. Have you seen me? With a tiny sketch of a fuzzy face and big bright eyes. Ellie knew, in her older Danten way, that most people wouldn't take notice. But hope isn't always logical. Sometimes it just wants to be held up in the light, like a firefly in a jar each evening. Ellie and Ben would kneel by the sliding glass door and leave a small plate of Dandelion-approved snacks. A broken nut, a thin slice of apple, pumpkin seed hearts, the kind Ellie used to tuck into her lunchbox before sharing the extras through Dandelion's cage bars. They always placed his cage right beside the door open, lit softly with the kind of lamp meant to mimic starlight. A beacon, her mother called it. Something to guide him if he wandered close. For over a week, the cage stayed empty. He could be anywhere, Ellie whispered once, curled in a blanket with her nose pressed to the glass. What if a bird, ... What if he's cold? He's tough, Ben had said, the words stiff in his throat. You said it yourself, he's smart. He's probably making a whole hamster city by now. That night, Ellie dreamed of Dandelion with a crown of straw, ruling kindly over badgers and field mice. But in the morning, the cage was still untouched. The house adjusted the way places sometimes do when grief hangs around unacknowledged. Shoes were removed more quietly. Music played softer. Meals still included laughter, but it felt borrowed, like reading a joke from a card. Even Ben seemed quieter, his usual teasing reserved only for rare moments now. Carla started leaving the porch light on past midnight, even when Sam mentioned wastefulness. Sam, for his part, would stop outside on his way to work and scan the flower beds with a frown he didn't take to breakfast. Even the neighbors asked. Still no sign. Mrs. Keegan from next door said gently one morning, holding her watering can like an apology. Ellie shook her head. He's just gone. I wouldn't give up. The older woman smiled, lips wrinkling like aging petals. The smallest creatures can have the strongest sense of home. You'd be surprised. That night, Ellie took out her diary for the first time in days. On a clean page, she drew a map not of streets or backyards, but of the world the way Dandelion might see it. Vents became highways. Couch legs were forests. Piles of leaves were golden cities with turrets and tunnels. She marked her room with a star and wrote, "The heart." Then, with a sleepy blink, she whispered to the drawing, "So you don't forget where to come back." Somewhere between night and morning, something changed. Ellie didn't notice it. Right away it was Ben, walking past the kitchen counter before school. His foot paused mid-step. On the wooden floor near the baseboard, barely visible unless you looked closely, was a line of tiny indentations. "Ellie," he called, voice low, "come here." They knelt together. A trail. Just a few prints. No. Longer than raindrops for digits, and a faint pad, too small to be anything else. They led toward the sliding glass door. Ellie covered her mouth. She didn't speak. They returned to the routine with renewed devotion. Traps were rebaited. The beacon cage reset each night with precision. Ellie requested to read out loud again. At bedtime, "I know he can't hear me," she said, adjusting the pillow beneath her back. Ben shrugged. "Maybe he can." They didn't talk about what it meant to keep trying. They just did. On the 12th day, something even smaller changed. The cracker on the plate outside had a bite taken out of it. It shouldn't have been remarkable, yet Ellie felt her chest flutter. Could be a squirrel, Ben said, but his eyes were soft with question, not contradiction. The next morning, the flowers scattered near the patio door held a tiny track. One print only, but unmistakable. They circled it in pencil and wrote the date beside it like a ceremony. Ellie didn't cry, Not then. She waited until she was alone. She knelt beside the cage, placed one arm inside with the awkward care of a prayer, and whispered, "Please, keep coming." Then she left a bit of dried banana near the tunnel entrance, and her favorite sweater sleeve folded like a nest. After school, she opened her diary again to the page with the map. This time, she drew a winding dotted line that arched through grass and leaf in concrete. It ended at the star labeled the heart. Beside it, she drew a paw print, and underneath, in a new line, she scribbled, "He's remembering." It began subtly, like the first notes of a song you almost don't hear. Ellie noticed it first in the way the cracker she'd left beside the cage was not just nibbled, but shifted 2 inches to the left, with a strange little trail in the flower leading away from it. Just a single paw print, and then to more light impressions like pressed lace. Vanishing halfway toward the edge of the doormat, she stared at them for a long time, blinking slowly, trying to decide if her heart was making them up. But when Ben looked and his eyes narrowed in the same confused hope, she knew it wasn't just her. "I think he's close," she whispered. That evening, Ellie tucked a tiny food dish inside a low wooden box on the patio, a safer place for something small to venture into. She filled it with a thumb-sized portion of oats and a sliver of fresh blueberry. Nothing happened that night, but in the morning a seed was gone, the blueberry bitten through, not by bird or chipmunk. The signs were far too small, specific, and maybe that should have been enough to fill her with joy. But Ellie grew quieter, more focused. She didn't tell the neighbors or her teacher. She stopped adding doodles to her hamster map. Instead, she stared at the patio each night until her eyes blurred, and she began reading aloud louder, clearer, letting her voice carry through the open window as dusk settled in. Most of the time, there was no response, but one night, something odd happened. Ellie was halfway through her book, an old favorite, about an owl who runs a lighthouse, when a rustle came from the flower bed just below the window. She froze mid-sentence. Her eyes darted to Ben, who was hovering by the edge of her bed. "Did you hear that?" Ben opened his mouth to speak, but then another sound joined it, a soft, distinct pattering. Rustle, pause, scratch, wait, he whispered, "Keep going." So Ellie turned the page and kept reading. Her voice wavered at first, but as she carried on, something in the stillness outside shifted. No more movement, but the rustle didn't return either. The next morning, small tracks dotted the outside of the wooden box. Clearer now, purposeful, not just wandering, but returning inside the house. Sam installed a small motion light beneath the patio eave. Every time it flicked on, Ellie's heart leaped. For several nights, it caught nothing but wind or stray moths. But on the 15th night, it clicked on at 3:18 a.m. the next morning. Ben queued up the recording from the little flashlight camera nestled behind a pod of mums, and there, bathed in ghostly glow, was the unmistakable figure, a small, golden-furred blur. Quick, deliberate, pausing before the wood box's entrance. He sniffed the air, his ears twitched. He stood on his hind legs for a breathless second and turned his tiny head toward the window. Ellie didn't cry, not at first. She trembled silently, her knuckles tight around the blanket tucked beneath her chin. "That's him," she said, voice almost gone. Ben nodded again. They didn't tell anyone that night. Ellie sat by the window after her reading, remaining quiet. She didn't look down. Instead, she rested her hand near the sill, open and still, as though offering her presence to the air itself. And then, In the low hush between one page and another, a chaos of memory cracked open. Because Dandelion was close, he had followed the curve of the house. He had tunneled beneath vines and skirted shadows, inch by inch. He had crossed back from the rustle of leaf castles and the bite of cold ground. And unlike squirrels or wandering mice, he didn't scatter when the light came. He paused, because something in that light felt familiar. Something in the scent wafting from the window's creaser mix of candle wax and ink and Ellie's lavender shampoo was more than memory. It was home. He didn't know it by name, but his entire body did. The next 2 nights, Dandelion came closer. Once, he reached the very edge of the open cage set out beside the sliding door, sniffing its silver bars. Another time, he darted beneath the furniture top and sat for hours, unmoving, just listening. Less afraid, more certain. By now, Ellie didn't resist the swell of feeling inside her. She wrote notes and left them by the vent. "You're almost there. I missed you every day." Bravery is small sometimes. She tucked a corner of her old sweater beside the food plate, folded one of her storybook pages into a tiny fan and set it beside the cager signal. She hoped, to a heart that remembered rhythm. On the 18th night, something amazing happened. As Ellie read this time about a hedgehog's bakery, Dandelion came closer to the screen door than ever before. And he didn't just pause. He stopped. He looked up, tilted his head. Beside him, the cage sat open, soft light spilling across the bedding like memory itself. He crept forward, then stopped. Another sound stirred behind him, a breeze. A falling leaf, maybe a fox far off. He pulled back into the shadows, but not far, just to watch, to remember. And Ellie, she kept reading, because even if her words reached no ears, they reached the moment warm and constant and ready. She didn't know it yet, but Dandelion was already writing his story back to her, one pawprint at a time. It was the kind of morning that looked like it had forgotten to wake up. A fog hung low over the grass, mild and silver, draping the yard in hush. Ellie stirred before her alarm, something unspecific gently nudging her out of sleep. She sat up, rubbed her eyes, and blinked at the dim, barely there light filtering through the window. There was no sound beyond the soft tick of her clock and the occasional sigh from the heating vents. Nothing urgent, nothing loud, but something was different. Her legs swung over the side of the bed, slippers, robe, familiar, steps toward the sliding glass door. She expected to find the usual, the food tray picked over, perhaps the cage untouched, the patio still and ordinary, still waiting. But this time, she froze. There, just inches from the open cage placed beside the back door, was a small, unmoving shape. A curl of fur no larger than a handful of cotton, tucked near the corner where the patio met the glass. For one breathless second, Ellie couldn't move. Her heart stretched tight, held so delicately between hope and disbelief that it barely dared to beat. Then the shape shifted. A tiny paw, a tremble, and then eyes blinking slowly, adjusting to the light. One golden ear flicked gently in the fog. "Dandelion," she whispered. She opened the door a crack. Cold air rushed past her ankles. The little figure didn't run, didn't flinch. He looked up slow, deliberate, and Ellie stepped onto the damp mat with the kind of reverence one usually reserves for seeing moonlight through clouds. She knelt. Dandelion made a sound so soft it wasn't even a sound, more a look, a feeling, a presence turned toward her. He wobbled ever so slightly thinner than she remembered. His fur was streaked with dust, his eyes tired but bright, and without waiting for anything else, he took a step forward, then another dot, and then slowly, gingerly, he walked the last few inches and climbed into her open palm. He fit like he never left. Ellie didn't cry. Not then. She simply held him in both hands, close to her chest, her breath caught in pieces behind her ribs. He didn't try to wriggle free. He didn't nip. He just curled slightly, letting out a breath that sounded almost like relief. Footsteps came quickly behind her. Ben, their mother, then their father, robes slung clumsily over sleep-creased pajamas. No one spoke for a moment. They just knelt around her, a halo of warmth forming in the cold as they watched Dandelion's smaller, scruffier, but unmistakable sit in Ellie's hands like he'd been gone for an afternoon. Not a lifetime. A towel warmed in the dryer, a water bowl filled with care. The cage was cleaned again, though it never really stopped being cleaned. Ellie lined it with fresh bedding, tucking in his crinkle tube, his favorite chew sticks, and the soft shreds of her old sweater sleeve. When she opened the top door, Dandelion stepped inside without hesitation. He didn't run for his nest. He didn't dart beneath the wheel. He walked halfway along the first platform, paused, and turned toward her. Then, slowly, he curled into the center of the bedding, rested his head against a scrap of cotton shaped like a fallen star, and closed his eyes. He slept for almost an entire day. Later, a trip to the vet confirmed what they had already sensed. He was dehydrated, a little underweight, missing a few bits of fur from rubbing against rough outdoor surfaces. But otherwise, he was okay. Remarkable little guy, the vet said, holding him in gloved hands. Really remarkable. Back home, Ellie decorated his cage like a returning hero's parade. A new sign hand painted, edged in gold marker over the top bar, the bravest heart. Tiny paper flags on strings ran between the cage wires. Ben folded a blanket fort beside Ellie's bed as tribute. Her parents celebrated with pancakes for dinner, the way all big things should be celebrated. That night, Ellie sat beside the cage, journal in her lap. She didn't write anything grand, just a single word. Home. She closed the book and whispered, toward the quiet hum of the cage wheel as it turns, lowly, thoughtfully. Thank you for remembering, for finding me. Dandelion twitched in his sleep. Outside, the fog had lifted. The moon burned soft against a sky stitched with stars. The vent that had once led Dandelion outward now stood sealed, but the path he mapped in his tiny, tireless way still shimmered in the minds of everyone he loved. The way back didn't need lights or roads, just the memory of a heartbeat and one tiny pawprint beside a child's waiting hand. It's been a year since Dandelion found his way home. The seasons have come and gone, feathering the trees with green and bronze and frost. The house, once tense with quiet vigil, now breathes in its gentler rhythm again. Routines returned, laughter spilled back into corners that once held worry. Still, in small ways, Dandelion's miracle never left. He's older now, his face a little softer around the eyes, his body slower. He doesn't scurry the way he used to. Some days, he barely stirs until evening. His wheel creaks less often, and when he tumbles into his tunnel after a long nap, there's a sigh in the movement. Not weary, just content. Ellie keeps his cage near her windowsill, warm with morning light, scattered with little tokens and tales. She still talks to him each night, stories about the kids in her class, about the birds nesting in the yard, about a boy who gave her a blue marble on the playground. Dandelion listens, in his way. His ears don't flick as fast these days, but he blinks slowly, calmly, like turning pages with his breath. He still loves the smell of peanut butter, still nudges his ceramic tea mug when it's placed near belong, dried from the warmth it once held, but still, he sniffs like he remembers. Ellie's voice remains his favorite scent of all. Ben teases her less now, but never unkindly. Sometimes she catches him peeking into the cage and smiling without knowing it. He insists Dandelion is part raccoon and part ninja, given what he managed to survive. But in the quietest moments, when their parents aren't looking, Ben slips. Tiny goose feather tufts near Dandelion's bedding, muttering about making it extra cozy for the legend. Ellie wrote a story for school this winter, pages bound together with soft blue yarn. She called it The Hamster Who Found His Way Home. It was simple, almost too simple for the contest she entered it in. But the judges thought otherwise. They mentioned the way it made them feel something, in the place they'd forgotten most books could reach. One cried, another asked if Dandelion was real. Ellie only smiled and said nothing. Some truths are better left as memories the heart can hold. She read her story aloud during assembly, the gym echoing with words about a golden hamster and stars and footsteps made of trust. Dandelion didn't attend, of course, but later that night, she brought home a ribbon and placed it on the wall beside his cage. That night, she added something new above his sleeping spot, a photograph, just a printout from her father's phone. Dandelion, small and proud, emerging from under the patio tarp. Behind him, the faint outline of her hand reaching, open and waiting. Under the picture, Ellie had written in the corner, with the careful tips of a glitter pen, "Somehow you always knew the way." The memory of those days hasn't faded, not completely. The family still jokes about the great hamster caper, but there's something sacred beneath the silliness. Something Ellie clutches quietly each time she watches him sleep. A kind of reverence, a belief that sometimes the impossible isn't so impossible after all. The vent has long since been sealed, replaced with a new cover that gleams with fewer stories. But her window still cracks open each spring, not for escape, but for air, for birdsong, for the meandering echoes of the stars that once guided home a creature no longer than her hand. And some nights, when the wind is just right, Ellie says, she can still hear something in it, the smallest whisper of little paws on cold stone, of breathless quiet chasing the sound of bedtime stories spilled into the night. Dandelion doesn't stir much anymore, but when she rests her hand near the cage, palm upturned in quiet offering, sometimes he shuffles forward from sleep, places one paw against the glass-like memory answering a call. It doesn't last long, but neither do many miracles, and that's never stopped them from changing everything. The world gives us great, loud stories, ships and cities, heroes with armor, dragons and destinies, but just as often it offers quieter things, a hamster, a girl, a thread spun from a heart no wider than a seed, stretching across bedsheets and breezes and days spent hoping, because what the heart remembers, it does not give up on, and what belongs to us truly, deeply, will always find its way back, if we listen. Even if it moves on paws too small to hear, even if it returns not with fanfare, but with a breath and then sleep. Some souls, Ellie has come to learn, are shaped in such a way that they carry home within them, not a place, not a cage, but a promise to return.